This time on the Underbed Railway project, I'm bringing both colour and life to the layout with static grass. Welcome back to another episode of the Underbed Railway. Last episode I prepared the terrain by covering the base in a layer of universal ground texture and added a road running from one end of the layout to the other. Now it's time to start bringing the layout to life by adding static grass. And for this I'll be using a cheap static grass applicator that I bought on Amazon and a mixture of different lengths and shades of grass, as well as some straw for one of the fields and some mud texture for a little extra detail, or at least that's the hope. I'm starting off with the raised centre section of the layout. Once again, I brought this to my kitchen floor where the cleanup is nice and easy. And I'm painting over the ground texture with some PVA glue. You'll see that I leave two areas dry, and this is because I have other plans for these areas. Once the glue is everywhere that I want the grass, I'm coming in with a static grass applicator filled with 2mm summer grass, and I'm shaking this out generously over the glue before coming back in with my small vacuum. This picks up the excess grass, which can be used later. I then do exactly the same on the other side of the road, and already this section is looking much more alive than it was. This process is then repeated everywhere that I intend to have grass as the predominant base texture. Adding glue, then grass, and finally vacuuming up the excess until much of the layout has been brought to life. It's an improvement for sure, but it still looks a little flat. So, next it's time to go over the 2mm grass with some of this layering spray, which is basically a fine spray adhesive, before I scatter some 4mm spring grass blend over the top, and that will give both depth and a richer colour to the grass. While I let my test area dry, I went over the raised terrain and applied some of this mud texture to create a field entrance. And while it was still wet, I took this model tractor and I ran its wheels through the mud to give the impression that the gateway has been in use. Unfortunately, this model was a bit more delicate than I'd expected and some of the parts broke off. But it will live on as a modelling tool rather than a feature on the layout. But overall, I was very happy with how this mud texture looks once applied. With the entrance done, I then filled the applicator with 2mm static straw, and I gave the field a base coat of this, Before I went back over the remaining 2mm grass areas with more of a 4mm grass. The large areas are getting a pretty solid coat of this grass, whereas the smaller areas between the tracks are getting a more patchy grass area, and I'm applying dabs of glue and going straight in for the 4mm length to give this a more patchy look. And then once vacuumed, I'm pretty happy with the look of that. Next, I took this signal box that I picked up from the model shop some time ago, and I decided to give its base a bit of grass as well. So with some more PVA glue and some more 4mm grass added, it should fit in much more nicely. Returning to the field, I thought that before I added the longer 4mm straw, I'd add some more of a mud texture around the edge of the field, and then some faint lines where the tractor will have been through the crop. And while I let that dry a little, I returned to applying the 4mm grass. I'm sure that some of the more expensive applicators may give a slightly better result, but I have to say I'm extremely happy with the performance from this cheap one. Now with the longer grass and straw applied, I wanted to just have a go at these road marking stencils. I bought these as a kit from Scale Model Scenery, and there's a stencil for pretty much any road marking you could need. The sponge method wasn't quite working because of my road surface, so I resorted to a small brush, and I did make a bit of a mess of it to begin with, but I think when I'm done this will look great. I'll be using more of these in the next video, and being completely reusable, I'll be using them for many more projects in the future too. So, there we have it. There's still a lot of work to do, and with Christmas just around the corner, finding the time to work on this is difficult right now. But it's really starting to take shape, and with a few more details and some track cleaning, I think it will be ready for a running session very soon.